This is completely crazy, but we need to discuss the Embracer Group drama because this is just something that's never happened before and it's probably never going to happen again. But we really need to dig into this idea of massive acquisitions. There has been so much talk this year about acquisitions because of things like PlayStation buying Bungie. Obviously, there's the Microsoft Activision deal that costs them $70 billion. But while Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony have been sort of battling it out, in the background, a group of Swedish mega millionaires have been buying up a huge chunk of the entire gaming industry. And we need to talk about their latest acquisitions because I think things are about to change. What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here. Hi, hope you're having a great day. If you could like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. This is daily gaming videos and I'm completely losing my mind. But late last night, Embracer Group announced that they're purchasing some very random stuff that is extremely expensive. They brought limited run games, which I need to explain why that's just such a big deal. They bought Singstrix, which doesn't sound like a big studio, but we need to talk about that. Embracer Group purchased the entirety of the Lord of the Rings universe, everything that George R.R. Tolkien has written. So that means legally they own The Hobbit, they own Lord of the Rings, they're able to make video games, movies, TV shows, comic books. I mean, they could write Lord of the Rings 2 for all they care right now, which is insane. They've also bought things like Tuxedo Labs. Now, a lot of these people, like Tripwire, you may think, okay, these don't sound major. These sound like just tiny acquisitions. They're buying up so many studios that with this latest batch of acquisitions, they had to announce that they're now making subgroups inside the company to actually run and focus each of these different studios. Let me show you a pie chart. I'm losing my mind. This is just so crazy. So this is something that was made in February before the latest batch of mega acquisitions. So you can see here, we have Microsoft and the 23 studios that Microsoft has. We can go over here. We see Tencent. We've got EA. Now you can see this is Sony right here, this rather tiny slice. I think that Sony's studios are fantastic. Obviously, Sony Santa Monica, Naughty Dog, Insomniac, all dropping bangers, Guerrilla Games. But if you'll notice here, Take-Two, mostly just some Rockstar stuff. Ubisoft has 80 different flavors of Ubisoft-style games, but Embracer Group is literally the biggest piece of the pie. Now, once again, I am going to remind you, this is old. This is 6 months ago this pie chart was made. Already you can see stuff like Volition, you can see Aspyr, which made the KOTOR remake. So many different games. Free Radical, 3D Realms, which makes Duke Nukem. Obviously stuff in here like, oh my gosh, this is just Sandbox Strategies. Gosh, this is just insane. But here's what's really important. This is still out of date. They also did the gigantic acquisition a couple months ago where they bought Eidos Montreal, Crystal Dynamics. Gosh, this means that now they own things like Deus Ex, they own Soul Reaver, they own, somebody actually tallied it up, they have 400 separate IPs now. They have more separate universes combined in their bank account than any gaming studio has ever owned. Now, initially, it sounds like this might be a good thing because right now the Embracer CEO, this guy, this little Swedish dude, Lars Wingfors, is saying that he wants to try and do a back to basics approach to video games. He basically wants it to be more about the games, less about blockchain and NFTs. Now, part of this whole reorganizing it into subset groups, I think is very mandatory. Now, gosh, this is just so bonkers. I think what's actually happening here is that they're trying to do death by 1,000 cuts. So things like buying limited run games, part of the reason you would buy this is that limited run games produces obviously these things like their collector's edition. They print indie media and stuff onto physical cartridges. But the other part of this is that limited run games owns physical real estate. They not only own factories and production lines, I think they actually own their own technical game engines. I've read that they have their own styles of basically taking older code and putting it on new consoles. That's how they're able to re-release so many games like Shantae and stuff in perfect condition. Even just this list of acquisitions right now, though, last night just really shows the fact that they're trying to build up more of a gaming catalog. The fact that they bought Tripwire, that made obviously things like Killing Floor, Tuxedo Labs. They did also announce that there's going to be a mysterious other game that we don't know what that studio is yet. This is just such a big, expensive acquisition, and they've already announced they're changing things up. One of the things they've done is that right now, they were working on the KOTOR remake. They have now switched developers. So I've talked about this in other videos, but death by 1,000 cuts is definitely the most difficult of business strategies, especially inside the gaming universe, which is that instead of just trying to buy your opponent, or instead of just making bigger and better games to try and blast them out quarter by quarter to make sure your games and studios rise to the top, death by 1,000 cuts is where instead of just making one big project, you make hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tiny projects. And that is definitely what they're trying to do here. Now, I want to try and tell you a story here, which is about a thing called Dell. Dell computers back in the early 2000s completely sucked. They were a joke. Like, they worked, but you'd buy them at like Walmart or Best Buy. At the time, they were considered the very worst of PCs because all you could pretty much do was download pictures of Booba and nothing else. They could hardly run video games beyond like low settings World of Warcraft. Whereas at the same time, Alienware was really rising to prominence. These hyper expensive, big, fancy computers that could run anything on max graphics. And so therefore, it seemed like this weird dichotomy, the cheapest computers versus the most expensive computers. But you know what happened? Because we're in the future now, Dell sold so many hundreds of millions of those garbage computers that they ended up buying Alienware. They took over the entire industry and bought their rivals. They straight up just said, hey, we're going to chomp you up. And I think that is the long-term strategy of Embracer Group. Instead of just trying to outdo Sony, instead of trying to directly fight the biggest and best exclusives, the idea is to take existing properties and sell them again. Like, going back to this crazy pie chart, a lot of these games, Koch Media's in there, which means they technically own stuff like Shenmue, music, games. Like, going through this, New World's in there. Like, it clearly shows the fact that what they could do is use their 300 existing universes now and just keep doing remasters, re-releases, sequels. They own things like Darksiders. And even last night, funny enough, because you can see here's THQ Nordic right here, Deep Silver. God, it's insane. Gearbox, so it means they own, like, oh my gosh, they own so much. Last night I was up till 2 a.m. playing a bunch of the Saints Row reboots because I'm working on a big review. Even that is made by Volition. It's insane to think that this is just such a wide-ranging miasma of video games. Now, I've seen a lot of people actually panicking about this, and I do want to say I think that your fears are slightly founded. As it currently exists, all monopolies are bad. The bigger a company gets, typically the lazier it gets. And right now, this is the fastest growing group inside of gaming is Embracer Group. And I do think that what's partially scary about this is that Sony and Microsoft are constantly trying to sharpen each other. Nintendo is constantly jumping in the game and trying to make weirder peripherals, more interesting exclusives, bigger Zeldas and stuff like that. Everybody is fighting for dominance inside their own platform. Having a third-party company that seems to buy up any studio that's having financial troubles, this is a different experience. This is something that I don't think has ever happened before, and I'm not sure it can ever happen again. At this point, everybody is sort of on the chopping block. Now, everybody is sort of talking right now behind the scenes of what if Embracer Group buys Square Enix? They've already bought most of Square Enix's Western studios. What if it is that this next big acquisition, there's talks about maybe Square Enix getting bought by Sony. What if instead it's Embracer Group? What if every RPG, every MMO, every music game, every remake, literally every remake for the most part is done by one group? Things are going to change. As it stands, I'm optimistic but nervous. I'm excited for games like Soul Reaper to come back. I would love to see weird, more off-the-wall stuff. Like, they own stuff like, obviously they own things like Red Faction, very classic shooter, which has pretty much just gone to the ether. I would love for them to do like a Red Faction remake or a Red Faction reboot in the style of Saints Row. But I guess it's all about waiting. It's all about figuring out what could possibly come next. But what do you think? Tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a big old thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. By the way, If you haven't watched it already, I did a deep dive for Soul Hackers 2. I posted that this morning. That video took 45 hours to make. So, if you want to go click it and watch it, that'd be cool. Much love. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.